The email was open on my laptop screen, its sterile white light cutting through the gloom of our London flat. Outside, a persistent, miserable rain wept down the windowpanes, blurring the grey city into a watercolor of smudged stone and steel. The heater hissed a lonely tune. It was a sound I had come to associate with solitude. On the screen, the words were sharp and unforgiving. Booking confirmation, the Amalfi Coast experience. Below it, a list of names. Liam. Michael. Karen. Emily. His name. His father's. His mother's. His sister's. 4 names. 4 plane tickets. 4 spots in a sun-drenched Italian villa overlooking the sea. My name wasn't there. It was a blank space where I was supposed to be, an absence that felt like a physical blow. A cold, heavy stone settled in my stomach. So this was it. This was the final, official notice. I wasn't family. Not the kind that gets to see the Italian sun, anyway. But that wasn't how it started. It never starts with the final blow. It starts with 1,000 tiny cuts, so small you barely notice them until you're bleeding out. It really started a few weeks earlier, on a Tuesday that was just like any other Tuesday. The same rain, the same grey sky. I was in the kitchen, the one place in our expensive, rented apartment that felt like mine. I had claimed it, filled it with the scent of garlic and rosemary, with the steady, rhythmic chop of a knife against a wooden board. I was making Liam's favorite, a slow-braised lamb shank that took hours of patient work. It was the kind of meal we couldn't afford to eat out anymore, not in London. I swirled the rich, dark sauce in the pan, watching it coat the back of a spoon. 4 years of marriage. 2 years in this foreign city. I had followed him here, of course. When his company offered him a promotion in their London office, it felt like a grand adventure. "It's the opportunity of a lifetime, Chloe," he'd said, his eyes shining with an ambition that was intoxicating. "We'll be a team. You and me against the world." I believed him. I was a graphic designer back in Chicago, with a growing list of clients and a career I loved. But I loved him more. So I packed up my life, said goodbye to my friends, and put my portfolio into storage. The plan was simple. I'd get a spousal visa, find a job, and we'd build our new life together. The reality, however, was a bureaucratic nightmare. The visa came with a soul-crushing restriction: no recourse to public funds. No employment. For 2 years, I had been legally barred from working. My professional identity, the one I had spent years building, evaporated. I became Liam's wife. The expat wife. The one who didn't work. To keep myself sane, to feel like I was still me, I took on small, under-the-table freelance gigs. A logo for a coffee shop back home. A wedding invitation for a friend of a friend. The money was laughably small, barely enough to cover my own tube fare, but it was mine. It was a fragile thread connecting me to the person I used to be. The rest of my time was consumed by the unpaid, full-time job of running our lives. I managed the bills, navigated the labyrinthine council tax system, did the grocery shopping, the laundry, the cleaning. I was the home's architect and its janitor. I created a sanctuary for Liam to return to after his long, stressful days in the high-stakes world of international finance. I was the silent, invisible partner in his success. A contribution that never appeared on a bank statement. The sound of a key in the front door lock snapped me out of my thoughts. I quickly wiped my hands on a tea towel, smoothed down my hair, and put on a smile. It was a routine, a small performance I put on every evening. Liam walked in, shaking rain from his dark wool coat. He looked exhausted. The sharp lines of his suit were softened by fatigue, his tie already loosened. The boyish charm I fell in love with in Chicago was still there, but it was buried under layers of corporate pressure. "Hey," he said, his voice flat. He leaned in and gave me a kiss. It was brief, a habit. The smell of the damp city clung to him. "Hey, you," I said, trying to inject some warmth into my voice. "Hard day." "The usual," he sighed, dropping his briefcase by the door with a heavy thud. "Endless meetings. Markets all over the place. David is driving me insane." He walked past me into the living room and sank into the plush sofa, pulling out his phone. The tiny screen immediately captured his attention. I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, a familiar pang of loneliness hitting me. I had been waiting all day to talk to an adult, to have a real conversation. But he was already gone, lost in a world of emails and stock tickers. "Dinner's almost ready," I said, my voice sounding brighter than I felt. "It's the lamb you like." "HM. Oh, great. Smells amazing, Chloe." He didn't look up from his phone. I went back to the kitchen and began to plate the food. I took my time, arranging the lamb shank on a bed of creamy polenta, drizzling the sauce over it, and sprinkling fresh parsley on top. It looked like a dish from a fancy restaurant. A small, private rebellion against my non-existent salary. See? This has value. We ate at the small dining table, the one I'd found at a weekend market in Portobello Road. For a few minutes, he put his phone down. "This is incredible," he said after the first bite, and for a moment, he was the old Liam. The man who saw me, who appreciated the little things. "Honestly, Chloe, you could be a chef." I smiled, a genuine one this time. "Well, I have a lot of time to practice." It was the wrong thing to say. A shadow crossed his face. The walls went back up. "Yeah," he said, his tone shifting. He picked up his fork and pushed the food around his plate. The comfortable silence was replaced by a tense one. I knew what was coming. We had been having this same silent argument for months. "Got the credit card bill today," he said, not looking at me. "It's a lot. This city is bleeding us dry." I felt my stomach clench. It was always us. We were being bled dry, but he was the only one with an income. The implication was clear. My existence was an expense. My life was a line item on his budget. "I'm being as careful as I can, Liam," I said softly. "I buy groceries at Lidl, I take the bus instead of the tube when I can." The lamb was on sale. I hated how defensive I sounded, how I had to justify every penny. I know," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "It's not you. It's everything. The rent, the utilities, the taxes. It just never ends." He let out a long, weary sigh and stared out the window at the rain. "I just feel like I'm treading water. Working my ass off just to stand still." I wanted to reach across the table and take his hand. I wanted to tell him that I saw how hard he worked, that I was proud of him. But I also wanted to scream. I wanted to shout, "What about me? What about the work I do all day? The work that makes your life possible?" But I didn't. I just swallowed the words along with a bite of lamb that had suddenly lost its flavor. "We'll figure it out," I said, the same placating phrase I always used. "We always do." He gave me a weak smile, but his eyes were distant. He was already thinking about his next meeting, the next financial report. The rest of the meal passed in silence, punctuated only by the clinking of our forks against the plates and the relentless drumming of the rain outside. Later that night, as we lay in bed, the distance between us felt as wide as the Atlantic Ocean that separated us from home. Liam fell asleep almost instantly, his breathing deep and even. He was exhausted from his world. I was exhausted from mine. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I thought about Chicago. I thought about my old apartment, my messy desk, the thrill of landing a new client. I had a purpose then. I had a name that wasn't just an extension of his. I had been applying for jobs. Not in the UK, that was pointless. But in Ireland, in the Netherlands, anywhere in the EU where my American passport and design skills might grant me a work permit. I spent hours tailoring my resume, writing cover letters, sending my portfolio out into the void. Liam was supportive, in theory. Of course, Chloe, if you get a great offer, we'll go. We're a team. But the rejections, or more often, the complete silence, were chipping away at my hope. I rolled onto my side and looked at him. In sleep, he looked younger, more vulnerable. The stress lines around his eyes were gone. This was the man I had crossed an ocean for. I loved him. I knew I did. But love, I was beginning to learn, wasn't always enough. It couldn't fill the empty spaces inside me. It couldn't pay for a plane ticket home. And it couldn't undo the slow, painful erosion of my own worth. I felt a tear slip from the corner of my eye and trace a cold path down my temple. It was a quiet, lonely tear, for a loss I couldn't quite name. And in the darkness of that London bedroom, I had no idea that things were about to get so much worse. The week that followed was a study in silence. A cold, heavy quiet settled over our apartment, absorbing all the little sounds of life. We moved around each other like ghosts, our conversations reduced to brief, necessary exchanges. Did you get the milk? I'll be home late. Good night. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the memory of that disastrous dinner. I tried to busy myself, pouring all my energy into a small branding project for an online bakery. It was a lifeline, a tiny corner of the world where my skills still mattered, where I could create something beautiful and be paid, however modestly, for it. The fragile piece was shattered on a Saturday morning. I was at my desk, sketching out logo ideas, when Liam walked in, holding a piece of paper. It was a bank statement. My heart did a familiar, nervous flutter. "Chloe, can we talk about this?" he asked. His tone wasn't angry, not yet. It was weary, like a man carrying a burden too heavy for one person. He pointed to a line item. £150 for a software subscription. What is this? I took a deep breath, preparing my defense. It's for my design work, Liam. It's the industry standard suite. I was using a free trial, but it expired. I need it for the bakery project. He stared at the paper, then at me. £150. For a project that's paying you what, 200? That doesn't make sense, Chloe. It's not a sound investment. The condescension in his voice, the way he said, investment, as if I were a failing startup, made something hot and sharp rise in my throat. It's an investment in myself, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. It's a tool for my trade. The same way your company pays for your computer and your phone. That's different, he said immediately. My job pays our rent. It pays for everything. He gestured vaguely around the room, at the life I so carefully maintained. And what I do is nothing. The question flew out of me, raw and wounded. The food that magically appears in the fridge, the clean clothes in the closet, the fact that you haven't had to think about a single bill or appointment since we moved here. Does that have no value? Oh, here we go, he said, tossing the statement onto my desk. The papers I've been working on scattered. I knew this was coming. I work a 60-hour week, Chloe. I come home exhausted. The last thing I need is a lecture about how I don't appreciate you. I'm not giving a lecture, I'm stating a fact. My voice was rising, and I couldn't stop it. My work isn't a hobby, Liam. And this house doesn't clean itself. I am working too, maybe not for a paycheck you recognize, but I am working all the time. He let out a short, bitter laugh. It was a sound I had never heard from him before, and it terrified me. You don't get it, do you? You swipe a card, and the money just comes out. You have no idea what it takes to put that money in there. The pressure, the stress. I'm responsible for us. For you. And then he delivered the blow. The words I would play over and over in my head for days, for weeks. The words that would become the anthem of my heartbreak. He looked at me, his face hard, all the love and softness gone, replaced by a cold, cruel resentment. You know, he said, his voice dangerously low. My family, my parents, my sister, they don't ask me for anything. They understand. You can't expect to be treated the same as them. They don't depend on me. I work hard for this money, Chloe. I work for every single penny. Silence. The world stopped. The rain pattering against the window, the hum of the city, my own heartbeat, it all went silent. His words hung in the air between us, shimmering and toxic. You can't expect to be treated the same as them. I wasn't his family. I was a dependent. An expense. An obligation. I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at him, trying to reconcile the man standing in front of me with the one who had held my hand at the altar and promised to be my partner, my equal, my family. They weren't the same person. Get out, I whispered. The words were so quiet I wasn't sure I had actually said them. What? Get out, I said again, louder this time, my voice shaking with a fury born of pure pain. Just get out of my space. He looked taken aback, then his face hardened again. He grabbed his coat and keys without another word and slammed the front door behind him. The sound echoed through the apartment, a final, violent punctuation mark on the sentence he had just handed down to me. I was not family. I sank into my chair, my body trembling. I didn't cry. I was too shocked, too hollowed out for tears. I just sat there, staring at the scattered papers on my desk, at the logo sketches that now seemed so childish and pointless. He had finally said it. He had given voice to the ugly little fear that had been growing in the dark corners of my heart for 2 years. I was a burden. And my contributions, my love, my support, were worthless because they didn't come with a price tag. The next few days were a blur of cold civility. He apologized, of course. I mumbled, I was stressed. I didn't mean it, offered over breakfast, his eyes fixed on his toast. I nodded, accepting the apology because it was easier than continuing the fight, but I didn't believe him. He had meant it. In that moment of anger, the truth had slipped out. I retreated further into myself. The apartment that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a gilded cage. I was the keeper of a home that wasn't truly mine, for a man who saw me as an employee he couldn't fire. Then, about a week after the fight, he came home with a different energy. He seemed lighter, almost cheerful. It was unsettling. He found me in the kitchen, where I was methodically chopping vegetables for a soup, finding solace in the repetitive motion. Hey, he said, leaning against the counter. So, I have some news. Kind of exciting. I kept chopping. Okay. You know my parents' 40th anniversary is next month, he began. I nodded. We had talked about it months ago, about flying back to Chicago to celebrate with them. Well, Mom had this idea. She wants to do something really special. The whole family. He paused, and I finally looked up. His smile was a little too bright, a little too forced. They want to go to Italy. The Amalfi Coast. For a week. Italy. The word itself was a splash of color in my gray world. I pictured cobblestone streets, vibrant blue water, lemon groves. A flicker of hope ignited in my chest, foolish and naive. Maybe this was his peace offering. A grand gesture. A way to say, I'm sorry, let's get away from all this, let's be us again. But then I saw the look in his eyes. It was pity. It sounds amazing, I said, my voice carefully neutral. Yeah, it will be, he said, and then he dropped the other shoe. Listen, Chloe, with everything we talked about, with money being so tight, I just don't think we can swing a ticket for you this time. It's not in the budget. The flicker of hope died, snuffed out as quickly as it had appeared. There it was again. Budget. Not in the budget. I was not in the budget. He said, we, but he meant, I. I can't afford you. I turned back to my chopping board, my knuckles white as I gripped the knife. The rhythmic thud of the blade was the only sound for a long moment. Thud. 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 Like a gavel, passing judgment. I see, I said. My voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. I was a calm, placid lake on the surface, but underneath, a storm was raging. I thought that was it. I thought that was the end of the conversation, the peak of the humiliation. I was wrong. He cleared his throat, suddenly all business. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. So, on that note, I was hoping you could help. I know how amazing you are at planning this stuff. You always find the best deals, the coolest little spots. Mom and Dad want that authentic experience, you know. Not the tourist traps. He unfolded the paper. It was a list. Positano or Priano? Villa versus hotel. Flights into Naples. Train schedules. Restaurant recommendations, seafood. Boat tour. He was asking me to be the architect of my own exclusion. To use my skills, my time, my unpaid labor, to plan the perfect vacation for the family I wasn't allowed to be a part of. He wanted me to research the sun-drenched beaches I wouldn't walk on, book the charming restaurants where I wouldn't eat, and find the beautiful villa where I wouldn't sleep. I slowly put the knife down on the counter. I turned to face him, my hands flat on the cool granite, grounding me. I looked at him, really looked at him. At his hopeful, expectant face. At his complete and utter blindness to the cruelty of what he was asking. He didn't see it. He genuinely thought this was a reasonable request, a simple favor. He was asking his unpaid personal assistant to handle his travel arrangements. A strange calm washed over me. The pain was still there, a deep, throbbing ache in my chest, but it was now overlaid with a layer of ice. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the space between us with the force of a physical object. Liam blinked, his smile faltering. No. What do you mean, no? I mean, no, I repeated, my voice steady. I will not be planning your family trip to Italy. I picked up a piece of chopped carrot and put it in the bowl, my movements deliberate. Since I'm not going, it's not my concern. It sounds like your problem, not mine. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He was utterly baffled. The concept of me refusing him was so foreign, it was like I had just started speaking in another language. The battle lines had been drawn. He had told me I wasn't family. And I had just decided to believe him. The aftermath of my no was a profound and unsettling stillness. The apartment, which had already been quiet, now felt cavernous, each footstep echoing in the void. Liam treated me with a bewildered caution, like I was a familiar object that had suddenly started behaving unpredictably. He'd watch me from the corner of his eye as I read a book on the sofa or typed away at my laptop. He was waiting for the ice to thaw, for me to soften and say, okay, fine, I'll look at the flights. But the ice was not thawing. It was hardening, spreading from my heart through my veins, a necessary defense mechanism. He tried a different tactic a few days later. He came home with a bouquet of pink tulips, my favorite. He set them in a vase on the kitchen counter, a bright splash of color in the otherwise muted room. I was washing dishes, my back to him. I was thinking, he started, his voice gentle, conciliatory. Maybe I was a bit hasty. About the trip. I didn't turn around. I kept scrubbing a plate with methodical focus. Oh. It's just no one is as good at this as you are, Chloe, he said, his voice laced with the kind of charm that used to work on me every time. You have a gift for it. You find the magic. Without you, we'll probably end up in some horrible tourist trap hotel eating bad pasta. He laughed a little, trying to make it a joke between us. I rinsed the plate and placed it in the drying rack. I turned off the water and dried my hands, my movements slow and deliberate. I turned to face him, leaning back against the counter. The tulips were lovely. A hollow gesture. Then I guess you'll eat bad pasta, I said. My voice was calm, matter of fact. I wasn't trying to be cruel, I was just stating a consequence. His face fell. The charm evaporated, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. Chloe, come on. Don't be like this. It's for my mom and dad. It's their anniversary. Can't you just do this one thing for me? For them. For them. The family I wasn't a part of. He was weaponizing his parents' milestone, trying to guilt me into compliance. The old me, the Chloe from a month ago, would have caved. I would have sighed, felt a pang of guilt, and opened my laptop. But his words "you can't expect to be treated the same" had fundamentally rewired something inside me. They were a shield. I'm busy, Liam, I said, and the beautiful thing was, it was true. I have my own work to focus on. I gestured towards my desk in the corner of the living room. It felt good to say it, to claim my time and my work as valid, as a reason to say no. He stared at me, his frustration mounting. Your work? The bakery logo? Chloe, be serious. This is a week-long international trip for 4 people. It's a bit more important than drawing a cupcake. There it was. The dismissal. The belittling of the one thing that was mine. The heat rose in my cheeks, but I forced it down. I would not let him see me crumble. I would not give him the satisfaction of an emotional reaction. It's important to me, I said simply. I walked past him, out of the kitchen, and sat down at my desk, pointedly opening my design software. The message was clear. The conversation was over. From across the room, I heard him let out an exasperated sigh. Fine. Be selfish. I'll do it myself. The silence that followed was charged with his resentment. For the rest of the evening, the only sounds were the clicking of my mouse and the furious, frustrated tapping of his fingers on his own laptop. I could feel his struggle from across the room. He was a finance guy. He lived in spreadsheets and data. The abstract, creative task of planning a beautiful, memorable trip was completely foreign to him. He was a tourist in the world I inhabited so naturally. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from Sarah. Coffee tomorrow? My treat. You sound like you need it. Sarah was my lifeline in London. We had met in a yoga class filled with other expat wives. She was from New York, a sharp, witty lawyer who, like me, had put her career on hold to follow her husband, an investment banker. But Sarah had navigated the transition with a fierce self-possession that I envied. She had enrolled in an art history course at UCL, learned to bake sourdough, and had a network of friends that was entirely her own. She saw right through the polite facade of our privileged but isolating lives. The next day, we met at a small cafe in Marylebone. The smell of roasted coffee and pastries was a warm hug. I poured out the whole story: the fight about money, his cruel words, the Italy trip, his request, my refusal. I told it in a flat, monotone voice, as if I were reciting facts about someone else's life. When I finished, Sarah took a long sip of her latte, her intelligent eyes fixed on me. Good, she said. I blinked. Good. Good for you, Chloe, she clarified, setting her cup down with a decisive click. It's about damn time. You've been letting him walk all over you for 2 years. Her validation was so immediate, so absolute, it felt like a dam breaking inside me. My carefully constructed composure cracked, and tears I didn't know I was holding back welled in my eyes. But is it selfish? I whispered, the word Liam had thrown at me still ringing in my ears. It's his parents' anniversary. Maybe I should just help. For the sake of peace. Sarah reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her touch was firm, grounding. Listen to me. Is it selfish to refuse to be your own executioner? He fires you from the family, then asks you to plan the party you're not invited to. In what universe is that okay? He's not asking for a favor. He's demanding free labor from a position of power. He holds all the cards, the money, the visa, everything, and he's using it to make you feel small. Don't you dare let him. Her words were like a splash of cold water. She was right. It wasn't about the trip. It was about respect. Or the complete lack of it. He said he'd do it himself, I told her, wiping a tear from my cheek. Sarah snorted. Oh, I'd love to see that. Mark is the same. He can close $1 billion deal, but ask him to book a train ticket from London to Brighton and he acts like you've asked him to perform brain surgery. Liam will be begging you for help in a week, tops. We sat for another hour, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. Sarah didn't offer platitudes or easy solutions. She just listened. She reminded me of the woman I was back in Chicago, the one who pitched to clients, who negotiated contracts, who knew her own value. You're a talented designer, Chloe, she said as we were leaving. You've let this situation convince you that you're not. Don't forget who you are. I walked home feeling stronger, my resolve solidified. The ice inside me was no longer just a shield, it was becoming a foundation. Liam's attempts to plan the trip were, as Sarah predicted, a disaster. I'd overhear him on the phone, his voice tight with frustration. What do you mean, that hotel is booked? The website said it had rooms, or, no, for adults. Naples. Naples. Yes, in Italy. He started leaving travel guides on the coffee table, open to pages about the Amalfi Coast, hoping I'd pick one up out of curiosity. He'd sigh loudly while scrolling through hotel booking sites, complaining about the prices. Everything is so expensive. I don't understand how you always find those little affordable places. I ignored it all. I focused on my bakery project, pouring my hurt and anger into creating a beautiful, whimsical brand identity. I built a website for them, something that wasn't in the original scope of work. I did it for myself, to prove that I could. The tension in the apartment was becoming unbearable. It was a silent, bitter war of attrition. He was waiting for me to surrender. I was waiting for him to understand. Neither was happening. One evening, I was on a video call with my parents back in Chicago. I tried to keep things light, telling them about the bakery project and a museum I had visited. And what about you and Liam? My mom asked, her face warm and familiar on the screen. Any plans for a trip soon? You two work so hard, you deserve a vacation. I felt a lump form in my throat. I couldn't tell them. I couldn't admit that their son-in-law, the man they had trusted with their daughter's happiness, was taking a dream vacation with his family and leaving me behind because I was a financial liability. The shame was too great. We're just focusing on work right now, Mom, I lied, forcing a smile. London is expensive, you know. After the call, a wave of profound homesickness washed over me. I missed the easy comfort of my family, the feeling of belonging without condition. Here, in this beautiful, lonely city, my belonging was conditional. It was conditional on Liam's mood, his finances, his definition of my worth. The final escalation came via a phone call a few days later. I was sketching in my notebook when Liam's phone, which he had left on the coffee table, began to ring. The screen lit up with a picture of his mother, Karen. I would normally ignore it, but Liam was in the shower. After the fourth ring, I figured it might be important, so I answered. Liam. Finally. Karen's voice was crisp, impatient. I've been trying you all day. Did you book the flights? Your father is getting anxious. Hi, Karen, it's Chloe, I said. Liam's in the shower. There was a brief, cold pause on the other end of the line. Oh. Chloe. Hello. Her tone shifted immediately. It was polite, but with an undercurrent of something sharp. Well, when he gets out, can you please tell him to call me? This trip is not going to plan itself, and frankly, I'm a little disappointed in the lack of progress. The implication was clear. The lack of progress was somehow my fault. I'll be sure to tell him, I said, my voice cool. Thank you, she said. And then, she couldn't resist adding one more thing. I do hope you'll encourage him, dear. He has so much on his plate at work. A supportive partner makes all the difference. When my husband was building his career, I handled everything at home. It's what you do. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command wrapped in a condescending anecdote. She was telling me my place. She was reinforcing Liam's view that my role was to be his silent, efficient, unpaid assistant. I'll tell him you called, Karen, I said, my voice tight. I hung up before she could say another word. I stood in the middle of the living room, my heart pounding with a cold, clear anger. It wasn't just Liam. It was his whole family. They saw me as an accessory, a helper. Not a person. Not an equal. Not a partner. When Liam came out of the bathroom, a towel around his waist, I was still standing in the same spot. Your mother called, I said. My voice was eerily calm. She's disappointed in the lack of progress on the trip. She wants you to know that a supportive partner makes all the difference. He had the grace to look ashamed. Chloe, Save it, I said, holding up a hand. I'm going out. I grabbed my coat and my purse and walked out the door, not knowing where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be in that apartment, in that life, for one more second. I walked for hours, the city lights blurring through my tears. Sarah was right. Liam wasn't just going to beg. The whole family was going to apply pressure. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that this was only the beginning. The city swallowed me whole. I walked without direction, letting the steady rhythm of my footsteps on the pavement match the frantic beating of my heart. I passed brightly lit pubs full of laughter, cozy restaurants with couples leaning in close over flickering candles, and theaters spilling well-dressed patrons onto the street. I was a ghost moving through a city that was vibrantly, painfully alive. Every happy face felt like a personal accusation. My feet eventually led me to the south bank. I stood leaning against the railing, watching the dark, swirling water of the Thames. The Houses of Parliament were lit up across the river, a grand and imposing silhouette against the night sky. I felt so small, so utterly insignificant. A tourist in my own life. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would understand. Hey, Sarah's voice was warm, instantly calming. You okay? You sound weird. He had his mom call me, I said, the words tumbling out. Basically told me I was a bad wife for not planning the trip he uninvited me to. I heard her exhale sharply. Of course he did. The classic, get my mommy to fight my battles move. Pathetic. Where are you right now? I don't know. The river. Somewhere. Stay put. Send me your location. I'm coming. 20 minutes later, she found me. She didn't say anything, just handed me a takeaway cup of hot chocolate and stood beside me, wrapping her own coat tighter against the wind. We watched the water in silence for a few minutes. It's not about the trip anymore, is it? I said finally, my voice thick. It's about everything. It's like this trip is a giant magnifying glass, and it's showing me all the cracks that I've been trying to ignore. The cracks were always there, Chloe, Sarah said gently. You were just too busy plastering over them to notice. You've been the glue holding everything together: his life, his home, his sanity. You just made it look so easy that he forgot you were made of something that could break. Her words resonated so deeply it was painful. I had worked so hard to be the perfect, low-maintenance wife. I had absorbed his stress, managed his life, and shrunk myself down so I wouldn't be a bother. And my reward was to be told I wasn't family. What do I do? I asked, the question a raw plea. Do I just keep saying no? Live in this miserable, silent war until he leaves for Italy and it's over? Is it over then? She countered, looking at me intently. He comes back from his sun-drenched family vacation, and what? Everything goes back to normal. You go back to being the unpaid housekeeper and personal assistant who gets to hear all about the amazing time she missed out on. Is that the life you want? The question hung in the cold night air. And the answer was a resounding, terrifying no. He doesn't respect me, I whispered, the admission tasting like ash in my mouth. Maybe he loves me, in his own way. But he doesn't respect me. And you can't have one without the other, Sarah finished. Not for long, anyway. Love without respect is just possession. We stood there until the hot chocolate was gone and my fingers were numb with cold. When I finally went home, something inside me had shifted again. The ice was still there, but it wasn't just a defensive shield anymore. It was starting to feel like resolve. I wasn't just reacting to Liam's cruelty, I was starting to think about my own future, a future that might not include him. For the next week, Liam tried to pretend everything was normal. He'd make small talk about his day, ask what I was working on. He even cleaned up the kitchen after dinner one night, a gesture so rare it was startling. It was all a performance. He was trying to lull me back into my old role, hoping that if he was nice enough, I'd forget the gaping wound he'd torn open. I remained polite, distant. I gave him one-word answers. I was a placid sea, giving him no waves to surf on, no storm to fight against. My calmness seemed to unnerve him more than my anger ever could have. He was trying to find the old Chloe, and she was nowhere to be found. The turning point, the moment that changed everything, came on a rainy Wednesday evening. It was my fault, in a way. I had been careless. I'd finished my work on the bakery project and had sent the final invoice. I was proud of what I had accomplished and had left the PDF open on my laptop screen when I went to make a cup of tea. Liam came home early. I was in the kitchen, waiting for the kettle to boil, when I heard a strange sound from the living room. A sharp, incredulous laugh. I walked to the doorway. He was standing in front of my desk, staring at my laptop. He was looking at my invoice. "You're charging them £500 for this?" he asked, a note of genuine disbelief in his voice. I felt a familiar knot of dread tighten in my stomach. Yes. That was the agreed-upon price. He turned to look at me, a smirk on his face. It was an ugly, mocking expression. £500? For a couple of drawings? Chloe, that's hilarious. Good for you for getting away with it. He didn't mean it as a compliment. He meant I was a con artist. He meant my work was a joke, and the fact that someone was willing to pay for it was a fluke, a testament to their gullibility, not my skill. All the weeks of hurt, of quiet fury, of biting my tongue, coalesced into a single point of white-hot rage. But my voice, when I spoke, was deadly quiet. Get away from my desk, Liam. I'm just saying, he continued, oblivious to the storm he had just unleashed. It's good money for a little hobby. Hobby. That was the word that did it. The final, ultimate dismissal. I walked over to him, my body feeling strangely light, disconnected from the fury that was coursing through me. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply closed the laptop. My hobby, I began, my voice trembling slightly, is the reason you have a clean home to come to. My hobby is the reason you have food to eat and clothes to wear. My hobby is the reason your entire life outside of your office runs on autopilot so you can focus on your important work. He took a step back, finally sensing the change in the atmosphere. Chloe, I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did, I said, looking him straight in the eye. You meant it exactly like that. You think what I do is worthless because it doesn't earn a six-figure salary. You think my time is free for the taking. You think my skills are something you can just use and discard as you please. I took a deep breath. This was a mistake. Coming here. Giving up my career. Believing you when you said we were a team. That's not fair, he said, his voice rising, defensive. I'm supporting you. I'm paying for everything. This life we have, it's because of me. This life? I shot back, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. This life where I'm a prisoner of your bank account and your visa sponsorship. This life where I am told I'm not family because I don't earn my keep. This isn't a life, Liam. It's a transaction. And I'm starting to think I made a very bad deal. His face went pale. He had no response. We stood there, the truth finally laid bare between us, ugly and undeniable. It wasn't about money or a vacation. It was about a fundamental lack of respect that had poisoned our entire marriage. The fight went out of him. He just looked at me, a dawning horror in his eyes, as if he was seeing the consequences of his actions for the very first time. Chloe, he started, his voice barely a whisper. But I was already walking away. I went into our bedroom and closed the door. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop again. I didn't look at my invoice. I didn't look at my design portfolio. I opened a new browser tab. And I started researching work visas for American citizens in Dublin. Then Amsterdam. Then Berlin. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a frantic energy propelling me forward. I wasn't just fantasizing anymore. I was making a plan. An escape plan. I was no longer just the woman who said no. I was becoming the woman who was ready to leave. And Liam, in his arrogance and his blindness, had absolutely no idea. He thought we were having a fight. He had no clue that he was in the process of losing me entirely. The days that followed the hobby fight were the quietest yet. It was a silence born not of anger, but of resignation. Liam seemed to understand, on some level, that he had crossed a line from which there was no easy return. He stopped asking about the Italy trip. He stopped leaving travel brochures out like breadcrumbs. He seemed to be hoping that if he ignored the problem, it would simply vanish. He was treating our marriage like a volatile stock, hoping to ride out the dip without selling at a loss. But I was no longer invested. My emotional stock had been cashed out. My focus had shifted entirely. During the day, while he was at work, our apartment transformed into my secret command center. The dining table was no longer a place for lonely meals, it was a war room, covered in printouts about immigration laws, job markets, and apartment rental prices in various European cities. Ireland was promising. The tech and design scenes were booming, and they had a clearer path for skilled workers. The thought of it, of starting over somewhere new, on my own terms, was both terrifying and intoxicatingly liberating. I was meticulous. I updated my portfolio with the bakery project, writing a case study that highlighted not just the design, but the strategy behind it. I rewrote my resume, translating my unpaid labor into quantifiable skills, household financial management, international relocation logistics, domestic operations oversight. It was a small, private joke, but it made me feel powerful. I was reframing my own narrative. One afternoon, I was deep in a rabbit hole of Dublin apartment listings when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Usually, I'd ignore it, but on a whim, I answered. Hello. Hi, is this Chloe Miller? A woman with a soft Irish accent asked. Yes, this is she. Wonderful. My name is Aoife Walsh. I'm a recruiter with Creative Solutions in Dublin. I came across your portfolio online, and I have to say, we were all very impressed with your work, particularly the branding for The Rolling Scone. It's brilliant. My heart stopped. I completely forgot how to breathe. I had sent out dozens of applications into the ether, expecting nothing. It was like shouting into a void and, for the first time, hearing an echo. "Oh," I managed to say, my voice a squeak. "Thank you. Thank you so much. We have an opening for a senior graphic designer that I think you'd be a fantastic fit for. I know you're based in London, but the position is here in our Dublin office. Would you be open to discussing it further?" My mind was racing. Dublin. A real job. A senior position. A salary. A visa sponsorship. A life. My own life. "Yes," I said, my voice suddenly firm, clear. "Yes, I would be very interested in discussing it." We scheduled a video interview for the following week. When I hung up the phone, I was trembling. I walked to the window and looked out at the familiar grey London street. But I wasn't seeing it anymore. I was seeing the River Liffey, the colourful doors of Georgian houses, a future I could build with my own 2 hands. It wasn't a job offer yet, not even close. But it was a possibility. A crack of light in the dark room I had been living in. That evening, I was so buoyed by the call that I almost felt a pang of my old affection for Liam. He came home looking haggard, the weight of his own world pressing down on him. He was still trying to plan the Italy trip himself, and it was clearly not going well. "I give up," he announced, slumping onto the sofa and throwing his phone down in disgust. "Every villa I find is either £1,000,000 a night or looks like it was decorated by a blind man in the 1970s. And my mother just sent me another 5 emails with suggestions. I can't do this." The old Chloe would have seen his distress and felt a surge of sympathy. She would have said, "Here, let me see." But the new Chloe, the one with a potential job interview in Dublin, saw something else. She saw a man who was only now experiencing a tiny fraction of the invisible workload she handled every single day. "That sounds stressful," I said, my voice neutral. I didn't offer to help. I just acknowledged his frustration, a courtesy he had so rarely extended to me. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Chloe, please. I'm begging you. I'll pay you. I'm serious. Name your price. Just take this off my plate." He was trying to speak my language. The language of transactions. He thought that by offering money, he was finally showing me respect. He didn't understand that the damage wasn't financial. It was emotional. He was trying to put a price on my forgiveness, and it wasn't for sale. "I'm not a travel agent, Liam," I said softly. "And I'm not for hire." His face crumpled in defeat. He buried his head in his hands. "Then what do you want from me?" he asked, his voice muffled. "I want you to understand," I said. But I knew he couldn't. Not really. The moment that sealed everything, the point of no return, happened by accident. It was 2 days before my interview. Liam was on a long conference call in the bedroom, the door shut. I was in the living room, nervously preparing my talking points, my portfolio open on the screen. The doorbell rang. It was a courier, delivering a package for Liam. I signed for it and, out of habit, placed it on his desk in our small home office. As I set it down, I noticed his laptop was open. He must have been working in there before his call. And on the screen was an open chat window. It was a conversation with his mother, Karen. My blood ran cold. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it was an invasion of his privacy. But I couldn't stop myself. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. My eyes scanned the last few messages. "Karen, any luck with the villa? Your father is asking again. Liam, it's a nightmare. I can't find anything. And Chloe still refuses to help. Karen, I still can't believe her attitude. After everything you do for her. Does she have any idea how lucky she is? My stomach twisted. I kept reading. Liam, I know. I'm trying to be patient. It's just been hard lately. It feels like I'm carrying everything. Her, the job, all of it. She's become this huge weight. A huge weight. The word seemed to lift off the screen and punch me in the chest. I felt the air leave my lungs. I was a weight. A burden. Not a partner, not a wife. A heavy object he had to carry. Karen, well, this trip will be good for you. A week away from all that. Just us. It will be nice for you to have a real break. Liam, you're right. It will be. Honestly, part of me is relieved she's not coming. We need this. Just the family. Just the family. I stumbled back from the desk as if I'd been burned. I pressed my hand to my mouth, a sob catching in my throat. This was worse than anything he had said to my face. This was the unvarnished truth, shared in confidence with his mother. He wasn't just excluding me out of financial necessity. He was excluding me by choice. He was relieved I wasn't coming. He didn't want me there. The pain was dizzying, a physical agony that made the room spin. I had been fighting for a place at a table where no one wanted me to sit. I had been grieving a marriage that had, in his eyes, already died. All my efforts, my sacrifices, my love, it was all a burden to him. I walked on numb legs to the bedroom door. I could hear his voice inside, calm and professional, discussing quarterly projections or market trends. He was in one world, and I was in another, and the bridge between them had just been bombed. I went back to my laptop. The recruiter's smiling face was still on the screen. The Dublin job. My potential escape. It was no longer just a possibility. It was a necessity. It was my only way out of this crushing, suffocating life. I looked at the chat window on his computer again. A huge weight. The words were branded onto my brain. Something inside me snapped. The grief, the pain, it all crystallized into a single, cold, hard thought. Fine. You want me to be a weight? I'll show you what it feels like when that weight is suddenly lifted. I didn't just want to leave anymore. I wanted him to feel my absence. I wanted him to understand, in a way words could never explain, exactly what he had lost. My quiet, orderly departure was no longer enough. I needed to make a statement. My eyes fell on my own laptop, my design portfolio still open. An idea, wild and reckless, began to form in my mind. He thought my skills were a joke, a hobby. He was about to find out how powerful that hobby could be. He wanted an itinerary for his perfect family vacation. Fine. I would give him one. An itinerary so perfect, so detailed, so breathtakingly beautiful, that he would never, ever forget the person who created it. The person he had left behind. The interview with the Dublin firm was an out-of-body experience. I sat at my desk, the version of our apartment visible behind me, carefully curated, a neat bookshelf, a single piece of abstract art, no sign of the turmoil that was my life. I spoke about brand strategy and user-centric design, my voice sounding impossibly calm and professional. I was performing the role of Chloe Miller, talented graphic designer, a woman with a future. And as I performed, I started to believe in her. The recruiter, Aoife, was warm and sharp. She seemed genuinely excited by my work. We talked for over an hour. When we signed off, she said, "We'll be in touch very soon, Chloe." This was a real pleasure. I closed my laptop, and the adrenaline drained away, leaving me shaky but resolute. The interview had been a glimpse of a life I could have, a life I deserved. It solidified my plan, erasing any lingering doubts. Liam's betrayal wasn't just a catalyst anymore, it was a launching pad. That night, I began my project. I didn't use a word processor or a spreadsheet. I opened my professional design software, the one Liam had mocked as a frivolous expense. I created a new file, A4 dimensions, print ready. The title on the first page was simple, elegant, and chilling, an unforgettable Amalfi Coast itinerary. For the Miller family. This was not an act of forgiveness. It was an act of war, waged with the weapons he had so casually dismissed, my creativity, my meticulousness, my taste. I would build him a cage of perfect memories he could never have without me. For the next few days, I worked with a feverish intensity. I became a master spy of luxury travel. I scoured blogs, design magazines, and exclusive travel forums. I cross-referenced flight patterns, sunset times, and seasonal menus. I didn't just find a villa, I found a specific 3-bedroom villa in Priano, one that wasn't on the major booking sites. It had a private infinity pool that seemed to spill into the Tyrrhenian Sea and a terrace draped in bougainvillea. I found the owner's direct email and drafted a polite, charming inquiry in Italian, using a translation app and my own sense of style to get the tone just right. I didn't just list restaurants, I curated culinary experiences. A family-run trattoria in a tiny fishing village, famous for its lemon-leaf grilled mozzarella. A specific table at a cliffside restaurant in Positano, timed perfectly to watch the sunset. I included notes, tell Giovanni that Chloe sent you. He'll give you the best table. I made up Giovanni, of course. But it sounded authentic. It sounded like me. I designed a day-by-day schedule, each page a beautiful, minimalist layout with custom icons. I designed myself a wine glass for a vineyard tour, a boat for a private charter trip to Capri, a fork and knife for a cooking class with a nana named Sophia, also fictional, but lovingly detailed. I mapped out scenic drives, hidden beaches, and artisan shops selling handmade leather sandals and limoncello. I poured every ounce of my skill into it. The typography was exquisite, the color palette inspired by the blues of the sea and the warm terracotta of the local architecture. I even designed a custom monogram for the Miller family, a tasteful M intertwined with a sprig of olive branch, and placed it at the top of each page. It was the most beautiful, compelling, and personal piece of design work I had ever done. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression. Liam watched my frantic work with a confused, hopeful curiosity. He saw me at my desk for hours, deeply focused, and he assumed the obvious. He thought I had finally caved. He thought I was planning his trip. Finding anything good, he asked one evening, trying to sound casual as he peered over my shoulder. I quickly minimized the screen. Just working on a personal project, I said, my voice cool. His face fell, but he didn't push it. He was afraid to. The power dynamic in our apartment had completely inverted. I was the one in control now, and my silence was his punishment. He was walking on eggshells, desperate not to say or do the wrong thing, completely unaware that he already had. A week after my first interview, an email from Aoife landed in my inbox. The subject line made my heart leap into my throat, offer of employment creative solutions. I opened it, my hands trembling so hard I could barely control the mouse. It was all there, in black and white. Senior graphic designer. A competitive salary that was more than I had ever earned in Chicago. A generous relocation package. And, most importantly, a promise of full visa sponsorship. I read it once, twice, a third time. I felt a wave of dizziness, a giddy, terrifying sense of freedom. I stood up and walked to the window. The grey London sky didn't seem so oppressive anymore. It was just a sky. A temporary backdrop to a life I was about to leave behind. I accepted the offer immediately. The final piece of my plan was the most difficult. It required a level of cold-blooded resolve I didn't know I possessed. I went online and looked at flights. I found a British Airways flight from London Heathrow to Chicago O'Hare. Then I found Liam's flight, the one he had finally, clumsily booked himself after my persistent refusal to help. London Heathrow to Naples. My flight to Chicago was scheduled to depart on a Tuesday morning. His flight to Naples was scheduled to depart on the same Tuesday morning. From the same airport. I typed in my credit card details, the one Liam paid for, the one he monitored so closely, and I bought a one-way ticket. The cost was exorbitant. An act of rebellion funded by the man I was leaving. The irony was bitter, but also strangely satisfying. The confirmation email arrived moments later. My departure was now as real as his. That evening, I finished the itinerary. I printed it on thick, high-quality cardstock at a local print shop. It felt heavy and substantial in my hands. It was a beautiful, tangible object. A ghost of a perfect life. I came home and found Liam on the sofa, staring blankly at the TV. He looked defeated. "Hey," I said. My voice was calm, my heart a steady drum. The time for games was over. He looked up, surprised by my directness. I held out the bound document. "I made this for you," I said. "For your trip." He stared at it, then at me, a slow, dawning relief spreading across his face. He thought this was it. The white flag. The apology. He thought he had won. "Chloe," he breathed, taking it from me. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." He opened it. I watched his face as he turned the pages. I saw his eyes widen at the stunning photo of the villa. I saw him smile at the restaurant recommendations. I saw the relief and gratitude wash over him as he realized he didn't have to do any more work. It was all here. A perfect, effortless vacation, handed to him on a silver platter. My final act of service. "This is incredible," he said, looking up at me, his eyes shining with an emotion I hadn't seen in a long time. It looked like love, but I knew it was just relief. "It's perfect. You're amazing. I'm so sorry, Chloe. For everything." He stood up and tried to hug me, but I took a small step back. "I'm glad you like it," I said. My voice was even. "There's just one more thing." I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened my email. I turned the screen towards him. There, illuminated in the dim light of the living room, was my booking confirmation. A one-way flight. To Chicago. Departing Tuesday morning. He stared at the screen. He looked at the date. Then he looked at the itinerary in his hands, a document detailing his own Tuesday morning departure. The gears were turning in his head, slowly, painfully. I could see the exact moment the connection was made. The moment he understood. His face went slack. The color drained from it. The beautiful, perfect itinerary slipped from his fingers and fell to the floor, the pages scattering around his feet like dead leaves. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "Chloe, what is this?" "It's my itinerary," I said. The words were quiet, but they landed with the force of a bomb. "You have your trip. I have mine. It seems we're both finally getting the break we need. Just the family." I used his own words, the ones from the chat with his mother. I saw the recognition, the horror, dawn in his eyes. He finally understood. He finally saw me. Not as a weight, or a hobbyist, or a dependent. But as a woman who was leaving him. The silence that filled the room was absolute. It was the sound of a marriage breaking. It was the sound of my new life beginning. The final days were a masterclass in quiet devastation. The apartment, once a battleground of tense silences and unspoken resentments, became a mausoleum. We were two ghosts haunting the same space, bound by a lease and the shared history of a life that was now definitively over. The beautiful, scattered pages of my spite itinerary lay on the floor for a full day before he finally bent down and collected them, his movements slow and pained, like an old man gathering relics from a ruin. He didn't put them in the trash. He stacked them neatly on the coffee table, a monument to his own spectacular failure. He tried to talk to me. The attempts were clumsy, desperate acts of a drowning man. He'd appear in the doorway as I was packing a box, his face etched with a confusion so profound it almost looked like pain. "Chloe, we can't just end this," he said one afternoon, his voice raspy. "For years. We've been married for 4 years." I didn't stop folding. I placed a stack of sweaters neatly into a cardboard box. "Yes," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "And for 2 of them, you've made me feel like a guest in my own life. For the last several months, you've treated me like a liability. This isn't a sudden ending, Liam. This is a consequence." I was stressed, he pleaded, the same tired excuse. "The job, the money," I said stupid things. "I didn't mean them. You know I didn't mean them." I finally stopped and looked at him. I saw the chat with his mother in my mind's eye, the words burned there forever. A huge weight. Relieved she's not coming. "The problem isn't that you said them, Liam," I said, my voice cold and clear as glass. "The problem is that you believe them. You can't apologize for a feeling. You can't say you're sorry for the truth." He flinched, a flicker of guilt and shame crossing his face. He knew what I was talking about. He didn't ask how I knew. He didn't need to. The knowledge of his betrayal was a palpable presence in the room. He had no defense. So he stopped trying to apologize and started trying to bargain. "What about Dublin?" he asked, a desperate, last-ditch effort. "If you have a job, that changes everything. We can go together. We can start over. It's what you wanted, right? For us to be a team again." The offer was so tragically misguided, so completely oblivious to the real issue, that I felt a surge of pity for him. He still thought this was about logistics. He thought a new city, a new job for me, would magically fix the respect he had so thoroughly pulverized. "What I wanted, Liam, was a partner," I said, taping up the box with a decisive rip of the dispenser. "I wanted a husband who saw my worth beyond a paycheck. I'm going to Dublin, yes. But I'm going alone. My new life doesn't have room for someone who thinks of me as a burden." Each word was a final nail in the coffin of our marriage. He finally understood there was no negotiation. There was no path back. He retreated into himself, a hollowed-out version of the ambitious, confident man I had once known. He'd sit on the sofa for hours, not watching TV, not looking at his phone, just staring into the middle distance as I methodically dismantled the life we had built. I was surgical in my packing. I took only what was fundamentally mine. My clothes, my books, my art supplies. My desk, the one I'd bought myself with my freelance money. I left the sofa he'd chosen, the dining table I had so lovingly found at the market, the bed we had shared. I left the kitchenware, the framed photos of us smiling in happier times, the ghost of every meal I had ever cooked for him. I was excising myself from the apartment, leaving behind a home that would soon just be a house. The day of our departure was grey and overcast, a fittingly somber London morning. We had booked a single-car service to Heathrow. An absurd, final act of practicality. We sat in the back of the black sedan, the partition separating us from the driver feeling like a metaphor for the wall between us. We didn't speak. I watched the familiar streets of London pass by, the red buses, the black cabs, the endless rows of terraced houses. I felt a surprising pang of sadness, not for Liam, but for the city itself. I had come here full of love and hope, and I was leaving with a suitcase full of ashes. At the airport, the automated check-in kiosks stood side by side. We stood in front of them, a perfect, tragic tableau. Terminal 5, Gate A10, Naples. Terminal 5, Gate B32, Chicago. 2 different paths, diverging from the same point. He turned to me, his face pale, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked lost. "Chloe," he whispered. "Is this really it?" I looked at him, the man I had promised to love in sickness and in health. The sickness had come, not of the body, but of the heart, of respect, and it had proven fatal. "Yes," I said. There was no anger left. No bitterness. Just a vast, empty sadness. This is it. He reached out, as if to touch my arm, but then let his hand fall to his side. He didn't know how to touch me anymore. Have a good trip, Liam, I said. The words sounded absurd, but they were all I had left. I hope your family enjoys the itinerary. I turned and walked away towards my gate, my rolling suitcase making a steady, rhythmic sound on the polished floor. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, I might see the man I fell in love with, not the man who broke me. And I needed to remember the man who broke me. He was the reason I was finally free. As I sat at my gate, waiting to board, I allowed myself to finally feel the full weight of it all. The grief came in a silent, shuddering wave. I wasn't just leaving a man, I was leaving a life, a future I had once believed in so fiercely. I was mourning the death of a dream. I put my head in my hands and let the tears come, hot and silent. They were tears of loss, but also tears of relief. The end of one story is always the beginning of another. On the plane, as we taxied down the runway, I happened to glance out the window. And I saw it. Another plane, with the same airline markings, taking off on a parallel runway, climbing steeply into the gray sky. It was heading southeast. Towards Italy. Towards the sun. I watched it until it was just a tiny speck, a silver glint in the clouds, and then it was gone. I settled back in my seat, buckled my seatbelt, and faced forward. My own plane rumbled, gathering speed, and then with a great, exhilarating lurch, we lifted off the ground, banking west. Towards home. Towards a future I couldn't yet see, but one that would be entirely, unequivocally, mine. Chicago greeted me not with a burst of sunshine, but with its own version of gray, a familiar, steely sky over Lake Michigan. But it was my gray. It was home. I stayed with my friend, Laura, a whirlwind of warmth and practicality who took one look at my face, handed me a glass of wine, and didn't ask a single question I wasn't ready to answer. My old bedroom in her apartment was small, but it felt more like my own space than the entire London flat ever had. There were no ghosts here. The first few weeks were a disorienting blur of jet lag and grief. I felt untethered, a ship without an anchor. The adrenaline that had fueled my escape was gone, replaced by a profound emotional exhaustion. Some days, I did nothing but sleep and watch the L train rattle past Laura's window, its rhythmic clatter a comforting, nostalgic soundtrack. I was decompressing, allowing my bruised heart the space to finally start healing. Slowly, tentatively, I began to stitch my life back together. I reconnected with old friends over coffee and deep dish pizza. They welcomed me back with an easy, unconditional acceptance that felt like a balm on my soul. They had known the Chicago Chloe, the ambitious, funny, confident woman, and they still saw her in me, even when I couldn't see her myself. Their belief in me was a mirror, reflecting a version of myself I was afraid I had lost forever. I started taking small freelance projects, reconnecting with old clients. The work grounded me. The act of creating, of solving a design problem, of bringing a client's vision to life, was a powerful reminder of my own capability. Each completed project, each paid invoice, was a small, steady brick in the new foundation of my independence. I wasn't just earning money, I was earning back my self-respect. Meanwhile, a continent away, Liam's trip to the Amalfi Coast unfolded exactly as I had designed it. My spite itinerary, my ghost-written masterpiece of a perfect vacation, became a source of strange, second-hand reports. His sister, Emily, who had always been kinder to me than the rest, posted photos on social media. There they were, the four of them, smiling stiffly at the exact cliffside table I had chosen for them. There was the villa's infinity pool, looking just as breathtaking as it had online. There was a slightly blurry photo of a plate of pasta, with the caption, "Best meal of my life." I looked at the pictures without bitterness. I felt a strange, detached sense of accomplishment. I had proven my point, not just to him, but to myself. My skills had value. My contributions, even when unacknowledged, were significant. The photos weren't a source of pain anymore, they were a validation of my power. A month after I left, I got a text from Emily. The trip was beautiful. The plan you made was incredible. But it wasn't the same. We all missed you. A longer message followed a few minutes later. Liam is a mess, Chloe. He's not talking to anyone. Mom and Dad keep trying to pretend everything is fine, but it's not. The whole trip felt empty. Like we were just going through the motions. I thanked her for her kindness but didn't engage further. His misery was not my responsibility anymore. I was busy building my own happiness. The move to Dublin was a fresh start in every sense of the word. The company flew me out, put me up in a temporary apartment, and gave me a relocation bonus that I used to furnish my own small, sunny flat in a neighborhood full of young professionals and charming old pubs. My new job was challenging and rewarding. I was surrounded by creative, intelligent people who respected my ideas. I was a senior designer. I was part of a team. I was valued. I fell in love with Dublin. I loved the sound of the rain on the cobblestones, the warmth of a pub on a chilly evening, the friendliness of the people. I loved the feeling of walking home from work, my own keys in my pocket, to a home that was entirely mine, paid for by my own labor. The silence in my apartment wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. 3 months after I left London, a package arrived at my office. It was from Liam. My heart did a nervous flutter, but I opened it with steady hands. Inside was a single, beautiful leather-bound journal and a letter. I read the letter standing by the window, looking out over the River Liffey. His handwriting was messy, hurried. Chloe, it began. I don't know where to start. I'm sorry, feels like the smallest, most useless phrase in the world, but it's all I have. I was a fool. A blind, arrogant fool. The trip to Italy was a disaster. Not because anything went wrong with the logistics. Your plan was, of course, perfect. It was a disaster because you weren't there. Every beautiful view, every amazing meal, it all just felt hollow. It was like watching a movie of a life we were supposed to have. I kept turning to share a moment with you, and you were gone. That's when I finally understood. You weren't the weight I had to carry. You were the one holding everything up. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About what I said. About what I did. There are no excuses. I let the pressure of my job turn me into a man I don't recognize, a man who measures worth in currency. I took your love, your support, and your light for granted, and in the process, I crushed it. I broke the most precious thing in my life because I was too weak and scared to see my own failings. I'm back in London. I sold the apartment. I couldn't stand being there without you. I'm in therapy. I'm trying to figure out how to be a better man. The kind of man who would have deserved you. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking for another chance. I know I don't deserve one. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see you. I see everything you were, everything you did. And I am so sorry that I made you leave to prove your own value. I hope you are happy in Dublin. I hope you are building the life you deserve. Liam. Tears streamed down my face as I read his words. They weren't tears of sadness, but of release. It was the apology I had never thought I would get. An apology that asked for nothing in return. It was a final, painful, necessary act of closure. I put the letter down and picked up the journal. I opened it to the first page. My future was an unwritten story. A new itinerary. Months later, I was sitting in a bustling cafe in the heart of Dublin, sketching ideas for a new project on my tablet. My life was full. I had friends, a career I loved, a city that felt like home. I was happy. Truly, peacefully happy, in a way that came from within, not from anyone else's approval. My phone buzzed with a message notification. It was from Liam. A simple message, the first since the letter. I saw your latest project featured on a design blog. It's brilliant. Congratulations. I looked at the message, at his name on my screen. There was no pain, no anger. Just a quiet, gentle sense of peace. He was on his path, and I was on mine. We were two separate people, two separate stories, connected only by a past that had taught me how to save myself. I typed a simple reply. Thank you. Then I put my phone away, took a sip of my coffee, and turned back to my work. I looked out the window at the lively Dublin street, at the people passing by, each with their own story, their own destination. My journey was no longer a reaction to him, or to anyone. It was mine. The itinerary was unwritten, and for the first time in a very long time, I couldn't wait to see where I would go next.